This half hour being brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports domestic microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies and ready-to-drink cocktails now. High Noon, Crown Royal, Jack Daniels. And the Pickle Bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills. Indeed, second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Very pleased to bring in from CBS Sports our good friend Dennis Dodd. Dennis, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
Dave, how are you? I'm good.
Good. I'm doing great. The Big Ten got together, and basically all they said was they're just going to look forward to the next week and recommend it be 1 through 12 and take away the automatic bids. I wasn't surprised by that, doing it one step at a time. But in the end, what do you see from these two conferences, and what does it mean for college football?
Well, first of all, the fact that they're even meeting together is historic. I think it's they announced this, whatever it was, this advisory group last February, and then met on it, basically to talk about playing games against each other. But that in itself was, I think, was important that they met aside from the other conferences. Look, what they're going for is trying to get these automatic qualifiers. They want to rule college football. I'm getting some feedback here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just some feedback here. I think they're going to go to, maybe by the end of this month, which is next Friday, they're going to announce going to 14 teams from 12 and to get these automatic qualifiers, 4 each for the SEC and Big Ten, 2 each for the ACC and Big 12, and then 1 at large and 1 for the group of 5. I think that's the way this thing's going to go down if you just want to cut through the hay.
Right, and I think eventually it'll be 16. That's just my gut feeling. Just like I think the NCAA tournament's the heck with 72, we're just going to go to 76. We're going to do it anyway. But I think that's in the end what they want to do with all this. And if they go to 16, they can pass it off as at the end there's 3 at-large bids and Notre Dame could have 1. In other words, that'll be the way of couching it. Your opinion on that?
Yeah, look, I would never say never. All this stuff is layered. ESPN doesn't have to pay for 14. It's written into the contract.
Yep.
So they can do this on their own. And they don't have to pay any more money for that. The schools, conferences don't get any more money. But they do have to pay for 16. In general, as I've already written, ESPN's against all this. They're against expansion. They're against the automatic qualifiers for some of the reasons I wrote about earlier this week. That there's a risk that here this becomes pro wrestling. If you know on November 1st that Iowa's in, it's one of the 4. Why watch? So you know where I'm coming from on that. But I do think they're going to that. I think they've got to wind around whatever ESPN wants. They don't always get. And these two conferences, the SEC and Big Ten, are going to call the shots. They're going to get input from the other conferences, but that's like input from you when your mother tells you to come in for dinner. You got to do it when you were little. So I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen really quick. And by the way, I'm talking about 26. I'm not talking about 25.
Yeah, 25 can't change. And when they meet in Dallas next week, they can drop the automatic qualifiers being in the top 4 and just make it 1 through 12. That they can approve next week because they can get the 10 conference commissioners and Pete Pavakwa to say yes to that, but that's all they can work on, correct?
Yeah, but Steve, there's even problems there because it has to be unanimous for 25.
Right.
And if you're, I don't know, the Mountain West, are you going to get rid of those designations, those seeds, those automatics when you just watch Boise State get in? So it only takes one of those conferences or Notre Dame to say no for this to happen. It could happen.
Yeah.
And it's not a big deal. I don't think the seeding and the buys are a big deal. They'll fix that.
Right.
But don't think it'll be easy.
Well, when you've got 11 people in a room that have to approve it, it's not going to get easy. And see, here, the issue you have right now, to me, is that Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are taking leadership roles because right now college sports is leaderless. So somebody's filling the vacuum, and they're doing it.
Yeah, they've finally gotten past they in general, gotten past the woe is me. What about college athletics? Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, said last June when we were in Destin, Florida for the SEC meetings, he goes, maybe I come across as a jerk now, but somebody has to be the jerk, and make these decisions. And that's what they're going to do. If you want to know the why, Steve, I can tell you the why.
Please.
And this is why this happened a year ago. The stuff we're talking about, the AQs and everything else, they even went as far. Remember this? They even went as far as give our champions the 1 and 2 seeds before the seasons.
Right.
And that got shot down. But I'll tell you the why for the whole thing. Tony Petitti had, determined that he's got 18 teams, and he needs more access for those 18. He's going to get pushback from his presidents. Why should we be limited? We have the largest conference ever. Think about that. Not just, ever in Division I history, 18 teams, largest ever. So he needs access. He needs more teams in. It gets more complicated for the SEC. They're thinking about going to 9 conference games. Well, there's liability there if you go to 9 conference games. After schools, your 16 schools, 8 of those are going to suffer a loss.
They'll lose.
Then you need then you need a cushion with a bigger field and automatic qualifiers. So that's why they're doing it, those 2 conferences.
And then maybe to sweeten it, maybe talk about because you have less risk. You talked about 8 schools losing on a given Saturday with the 9th game. The Big Ten and the SEC might play each other in a game, which they can then potentially sell off the way the NFL sold off 2 games to Netflix.
That's exactly what they're going to do. That's what they want to do. Play this challenge series of games against each other that would help. The Big Ten would like the SEC to play the same amount of conference games so they don't get a leg up, quote unquote. So you would have the 9 games, 3 non-conference games. One of those would be against each other, and that further monopolizes the power because that's going to be schedule strength for those schools that win those games. I go back to the old thing. In any of these media rights contracts, Steve, the worth of football is 80%. Mm-hmm. It's not even worth talking about basketball sometimes. 80%. Right. Yep. Within those deals, think about these 2 conferences. In any conference, the top 3 or 4 teams in terms of strength for tradition, history, encompass 75 to 80% of the value of that deal in itself.
Yep.
So I keep telling people, someday Alabama's going to wake up and ask itself, why does Vanderbilt make the same money as we do? Same for Penn State. Mm-hmm. Why does Purdue make the same money we do? And then, sooner than later, they're going to come after each other. And don't think it's not going to happen, because it will.
Well, it happened in a roundabout way. You don't think Mike Bone woke up one day at USC and says, why is Rutgers making that and we're in the Pac-12 making this? Yeah. That happened. You and I both know that. And he didn't call Kevin Warren. He called Fox. All right? So, contrary to popular belief. And that's what they did. He looked around and said, this is ridiculous. And I say that with all due respect to Rutgers, but USC is a brand unto itself. The other part, too, is in the last 9 seasons, so 2016 to 2024, there are only 18 schools that make up 50% of the TV ratings, and 15 of the 18 are in the SEC and the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I don't want to say you're not saying something isn't already known, but you're right. I mean, that's why this consolidation happened. When the Pac-12 disintegrated, those schools needed somewhere to go. And the Big Ten held all the cards and said, yeah, you can come in. I think that Oregon and Washington are coming in at a half share.
They are half, yep.
And I think they get a full share at the end of this current deal in 2031.
Right.
Which, by the way, estimates are that the Big Ten schools will be getting $100 million in TV revenue alone. So you see what's happening here. It's just a case of eventually, how many schools, if any, do they want to go along with them to play for a national championship?
Well, and there's you mentioned the money part. In the new deal starting in 2026, and correct me if I've got the numbers off here, but my understanding is it's 29% for the SEC, 29% goes to the Big Ten, 17% ACC, 15% Big 12. Notre Dame gets, I think the group of five gets 9%, and I think it's 1% Notre Dame or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's the CFP deal. I was referring to.
Oh, I know.
The media.
Oh no, the media rights deal. Yeah, right. It's going to go over $100 million. There, and Washington and Oregon will be fully represented in that deal. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, but the CFP deal is not insignificant. You're right. 58% of the money will go to the Big Ten and SEC. And the other 42% will basically be split again by the other 100 schools in FBS. Some more than others. That's the best way to put it.
Well, and this is a per school basis. Now, with 18, the Big Ten will be about $21 million a school, which is triple of what they're getting now. And because they have 16 schools, that 29% is going to be about $22.5 to $23 million per SEC school. And that's going to, again, same story, create that economic divide with the other conferences.
Right, and it's what they do with it. Look, early on in the CFP era, Ohio State's been pretty good. They won the first college football playoff. They won the latest college football playoff. Changed coaches in between, and still did it. Michigan has made it back-to-back. Well, Michigan and Ohio State have made it back-to-back Big Ten national championships in consecutive years for the first time since the 1940s. I forget which schools. It was Minnesota or somebody else. The Big Ten's doing pretty good right now. The SEC's on the clock. The Big Ten's always made more money than anybody else. It just no one knew it until it became important because of the stuff we're talking about. When the money started getting big after the 1984 Supreme Court decision that deregulated television. The Big Ten didn't do a very good job with it the last 19 years. The last two, they've done a great job with it, so we'll see.
You know some of the personalities. I've never met Greg Sankey. Tony Petitti I've talked to now several times. So give me an idea about the two key players in the room and your impression of each of Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey.
Well, Greg Sankey's a traditional commissioner. He came up as Mike Slide's number 2 in the SEC. Mike Slide is passed away, sadly. Great man, great commissioner, got it into the modern era. And he had named, I think, Greg Sankey as successor, years ago. Then when he stepped down, that's exactly what happened. Greg Sankey's from the Northeast. He went to Cortland State in Upper New York.
Yep.
His first job was at, I want to say, an administration at Northwestern State in Louisiana, and basically worked his way up. I mean, he is a traditional commissioner. Tony Petitti's a TV guy.
Yes.
Brett Yormark's kind of an entertainment and TV guy. We don't have very many of these traditional commissioners anymore, and I think they're playing off each other, the skills of each other. Tony Petitti I think as we've seen, knows the TV market. I think we've seen that. Greg Sankey is still trying to navigate and piece some of the academic model into this. I happen to think the NCAA model is dead and buried. Yeah. But he's a guy who was a strict amateurism guy for years until he saw what was happening. Until he saw that the NCAA couldn't legally defend itself anymore, and that's exactly what's happened. So, yeah, I mean, they both play their cards very close to the vest. They're extremely smart guys. They have to be to rally those presidents and those ADs, very, very powerful people in that room to get them where they are today.
There are active challenges on the House deal. Claudia Wilken is going to at least announce something, I believe, on April 7th. In the end, what's been your read as to the challenges versus her saying, here's the go-ahead, July 1st, you can start doing it?
Yeah, good question. She will hear objections beginning April 7th. I think that's a period of days. But there are scores of objections. You probably read about a new one every day. I just wrote about Gosh, the thousands of walk-ons that are going to be just cut away.
That's right.
Because of the roster caps. Some of the athletes from the minor sports have filed class action lawsuits or protested because their spots are going to go away. She's going to have to take all that into effect. But the people I talk to, the experts that know better, they do believe in the end she's going to approve this settlement because she's done what she's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. She's heard the arguments. She's heard the settlement. She was in the room, heard both sides, heard the lawyers. They both agreed to it. And there's nothing she can do about what the lawsuits that are going to come from this. And there will be many. It's going to be really hard instituting this thing. And it may not survive. I mean, I keep telling people the only way, to me, this is all going to work out is collective bargaining, whether they're employees or not. And I don't really care because, Steve, you and I have seen how it's going to look for the last, 3.5 years.
Yep.
On Saturdays, nobody cares. Beaver Stadium is selling out. They're competing for the Big Ten.
Yep.
You don't go in there talking about what's the right guard get. Maybe some nerds do, but I don't. And so that's what it's going to look like in the future. It's just going to be a different, where's the money come from? What are they getting? What have they bargained? And I think that's the way this thing ends. And in 2 or 3 years, maybe even less, we won't even be talking about this other stuff.
The one thing I'll be interested in, and you're right about that. People are going to go in and go, hey, look, I just want to make sure that Kyron Hudson's catching the ball. I mean, they don't really care about how much money he's getting and that Drew Aller's accurate with it. It's good. I think there's a Title IX challenge from the Oregon beach volleyball team and also the Oregon women's club rowing team. We know the Biden administration, on the way out the door in the last 72 hours of their administration, offered guidance on how the $20.5 million should be divided. You and I both knew the Trump administration would rescind it. They did. But what role can Title IX play in some of the stuff we were just talking about as this nulls its way out?
Yeah. Real quick, the new administration's rulings on that simply make it easier for these schools to fully revenue share the $20.5 million to adhere to a formula that is basically this: 75% goes to football. 15% goes to 15% goes to basketball. 5% goes to women's basketball. 5% goes to the other sports. That now is pretty easy to defend, given what the current administration has done, right or wrong. Mm-hmm. So there is clarification there that. So what is 75% of $20.5 million? That's about $15 million. So that's what you're going to have to start with in football to compete. And if you don't, and I've written about this several times, if you don't opt into that $20.5 million, because remember, it's an option. It's up to you. You want to fund it, you can fund it. If not, you don't have to.
Right.
You can do a portion of it. But if you don't fund that $20.5 million, you have labeled your program and your school, your entire institution, with a scarlet letter. You can't. That screams we cannot compete.
That's right.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that's what's going to come out of this.
That's exactly right. That's what I've told people along the way. I said, if you're an ACC school, you're a Big 12 school, and you're not getting the money the SEC and the Big 10 are getting, you still have to put out the $20.5 million because you're going to be looked at as minor leagues.
Yeah, I've written about that. I think that I've been led to believe that the 34 in the SEC and Big Ten, no surprise, are going to fully fund rev share. I don't think it's going to happen in the ACC and Big 12. In fact, I had one source tell me in the Big 12, half of those schools will do it. Now, I suspect what will happen is they won't do it, but they'll scrape together $10-15 million for football because they have to.
Right.
They have to go get players. A school like a football program like Texas Tech is all in. They've got Patrick Mahomes financing things. They're paying their general manager $500,000. They are going in big time to try to compete on a national scale. And you say Texas Tech, Texas Tech. Yep. I mean, that's what it's going to take to do this. That $20 million. I know in the Big 12, Baylor will do it. TCU has publicly said they're going to do it. Kansas State's trying to do it. Kansas, with a $400 million capital project in the new stadium, now has this heaped on top of it, is trying to do it. I don't know about Houston. Houston's a city school without that much infrastructure, so I don't know.
Interesting times. You're always the best to always get to the bottom of everything. Dennis, thanks so much for your time. Great conversation. Appreciate you so much.
All right, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And that's Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports, one of the best in the business, brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.